I'm excited to talk about how we both became interested in functional medicine because you were really the one who introduced me to it. But first, maybe could you talk about how you first heard about functional medicine?
Well, like many people in the field, I came to it through my own health journey and got very sick in my 30s, developed chronic fatigue syndrome from mercury poisoning. And I really had no idea what was going on. And I was working at Canyon Ranch at the time. And a colleague of mine, Kathy Swift, was a nutritionist, said, why don't we go to this conference or this lecture series on the weekend in Boston? And I'm like, sure, I'll go to anything to try to figure out what's going on. And it was with a guy named Jeff Bland, who I listened to very carefully and had this thought that either this guy's insane or he's a genius. And if everything he's saying is true, then it's really incumbent upon me, both for my own well-being and for the well-being of my patients, to explore it further. And then I began to really dig in and start to learn and go to all the people who were the pioneers back then, like Leo Gallen, Sid Baker, and others who really helped teach me how to apply this clinically with my patients and with myself. And it was it was shocking because I thought it was this big developed field at the time. This is back in the 90s. And it was really just at the beginning. But that's really what led me to discover that there is a new way of thinking about disease and health. And it works much better than traditional medicine. And it's founded on sort of emerging scientific, I would say, laws of biology that mostly been overlooked in our siloed, compartmentalized training. So Julie, I'd ask you the same question. How did you get into functional medicine?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting to think because, like you said, when you first found out about it, it was really this very small focus group of people that were studying it, and seeing how far you really took the field. When I first was introduced to functional medicine was actually when you came to introduce the Center for Functional Medicine at the Cleveland Clinic. So I
Oh,
had a background in CrossFit, and I was competing in CrossFit at the time. And so through that, I had been exposed to I think I had heard the word functional medicine before. I had listened to some of Chris Kresser's things maybe, but I wasn't really sure what it was. And then for some reason I saw an email come through that you were speaking, and I didn't realize what it was. I just thought it was, a talk you were coming in to talk about something. And then I went to the talk, and lo and behold, Toby Cosgrove's there, all of the department heads are there, and you're introducing the Center for Functional Medicine. And for the first time when you gave that presentation, it felt like someone was able to put together everything that I knew to be true about health into a framework that really made sense in order to be able to deliver it to patients. And so as soon as I heard the functional medicine model, I knew that that's the way I wanted to practice medicine.
yeah. It sort of reminds me when I think it was Thomas Huxley heard of the theory of evolution that Darwin had created back in the 1800s. He goes, how stupid not to have thought of that.
Right. Just makes so much sense.
And I think the other thing I was almost saying is when they hear about functional medicine, they go, this is just medicine that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it does. It's like, wow, when you sort of put on this new set of lenses and filters and you see the world through the framework of systems biology and systems medicine and functional medicine, it's like, wow, you can never unsee that.
Mm-hmm.
So Julie, you just got out of medical school, residency training. What advice would you give to new students coming in? For example, my daughter is starting medical school in a couple of months, and I wanted to sort of take the course at AFMCP and
Yeah.
read the books, and she's interested, but she's busy. So what advice would you give her who's starting medical school?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think we're lucky now that we live in a world where this information is a lot more freely available. And so I would give the advice to just go into medical school with an open mind and with a lot of curiosity, and ask a lot of questions, and just keep asking why, and trying to look outside of maybe your medical school curriculum for other information. So whether it's going to the AFMCP, I think that should be part of every medical school curriculum, quite frankly, is just at least going through the AFMCP to get that framework. And it gives you a way to then think about everything else that you're learning in medical school. Or just, listening to podcasts, reading books, keeping an open mind about all the other stuff that's out there, because I do find that most people I interact with today, most doctors I interact with today who are implementing functional medicine or some of these principles have come to it either through their own health journey and have then had to seek out these resources, or have sought out these resources outside of their traditional education. So I think we are coming a long way in terms of med school education, but we have a long way to go. And so I would just encourage anyone who's starting along that path to seek out other sources and just really go in with an open mind and ask a lot of questions and not just accept everything that you're learning as the only way to do things.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think that, Julie, that if people have a filter or sort of an interpretive guide to all the things they're learning, it makes medical school make much more sense, right?
Mm-hmm. So you have a place to file things away.
So the way I think about it is that if you have a new architecture of medicine, a new way to think about everything you're learning, then when you hear something new, you have, like you said, a place to file it. So before functional medicine, I knew family medicine pretty well and the basics, but I would read these sort of various papers in New England Journal or, JAMA. It didn't always make sense because it wasn't, quote, my field, right? Mm-hmm. The thing about functional medicine is everything is your field. We specialize in the human body. And what's really been helpful, I think, for me is once I learned the framework, the matrix of functional medicine, then everything I hear in the medical field fits somewhere in that matrix, right? It fits in the immune inflammatory issues or in the microbiome gut issues or the mitochondrial issues, and it all connects. And I just remember, I remember, like, back in the day, we had cassette tapes and we had cassette players in our car, and I was listening to Jeffrey Bland's cassette. And then I remember this moment, I was literally moment of driving, and I was like, oh, I get it. I get how everything is connected. That all these different systems we learn in medical school, all these different organs and all these different parts of our biology and biochemistry, everything is connected. And I understood how it's connected. For example, how the microbiome can affect the mitochondria, can affect the immune system, can affect hormones. Like the whole web just like popped into vision in my head. I was like, oh, I get it. And I think that's the hard part in medical school, because everything is compartmentalized in silos. So if you have this set framework, and even read the book, The Disease Delusion, or, maybe take an introductory course in functional medicine, it will really help people going to medical school to have a different experience and be able to actually get way more out of the data they're learning. Because what they're learning is important. You just need to know where to put it. Right?
Exactly. So true. So true. Well, we know that food as medicine is one of the core tenets of functional medicine. And we have, there are so many issues around getting access and getting good quality food, like food insecurity and GMO products, and the fact that packaged and processed foods are available on every single corner. And I know this is something that you've done a lot of work looking into, just our food systems. So can you explain a little bit about the problem with food in America, and then what recommendations you have for patients about healthy eating?
Well, we can't separate, healthcare from our food system, from our agricultural system. They're all connected. Why? Because the food that we're growing and producing, selling and eating is actually what's filling up the hospitals. It's causing the healthcare crisis we have now, where 6 out of 10 have a chronic disease and 88% are metabolically unhealthy. And it's mostly driven by food. In fact, a study published around COVID even found that 63% of hospitalizations could have been prevented by people who had been taking care of themselves and had optimized their diet. So literally the food we're eating is causing us even to get sick from COVID. So I think it's really important for us to think about connecting the dots and understanding how, as physicians, we can't just stop working at our clinic door, that we have to understand the bigger ecosystem in which our patients live and the food system in which they live, and how it's driving a lot of the problems that we see clinically. So for me, I've spent a lot of time working on this, and I wrote a book called Food Fix. I'm working on a campaign in Washington to educate lawmakers and advocate for policy change, and working with great partners like Tufts and Rodale to actually drive the changes that need to happen in the food system to improve the quality of the food, to create a regenerative system, a system that regenerates the environment, climate, soils, ecosystems, and regenerates human health. And in fact, functional medicine is sort of regenerative medicine. It's about the science of how do we regenerate health, and not so much focused on disease. So we really have to help our patients understand how to navigate this crazy system, and we also have to advocate as people in the healthcare field for a different food system in whatever way we can.
So agree. And I think that COVID is such a important wake up call for us, maybe as a society, to think about these bigger systems and the costs that it's having on us, because it's really putting a microscope on that. And we're able to see it on such a focused way with COVID.
Yeah. And you're really into the whole fitness world. I mean, I was so impressed with learning about your CrossFit endeavors, and you're, I don't know, the third strongest or second strongest woman in the world or something like that. It's pretty impressive.
One day you're going to do a CrossFit workout with me, Mark.
I was envious of your biceps. When you sort of in that world, it's really important for people to stay healthy and focus on nutrition. But, talk about the ways in which, our current food system sort of undermines people's ability to get fit and healthy.
Well, I love what you always say about this, which is that you really can't out-exercise a bad diet. And I think that is very true. But I think that the message that people have been getting for so long is that, if you just work out enough, you can burn off all the calories from whatever it is that you ate. And that's certainly not true, because it's much more about the nutrients that we're getting and that we need for our bodies to be functioning optimally in order to be able to perform well. And we even talk about in CrossFit, we have sort of a hierarchy of fitness, and at the base of our pyramid is nutrition. That is the most important if we want to be able to perform well. So whether it's someone who's trying to perform to be competitive, or someone who's just trying to be healthy and do physical fitness for health, being able to give your body the nutrients that it needs, macronutrients and micronutrients, is incredibly important. And I think that we get confused in this world of fitness, because there's so many different products out there that are, pre-workouts and post-workouts and all kinds of snack bars and things like that. But at the end of the day, the best thing for our bodies is really just to be eating real food.
There you go. All right. So Julie, I want to ask you, you're a young functional medicine doctor, and in my view, you're kind of the future of functional medicine. How do you see your role playing out in the future? And what do you want to do?
Well, I think that we're at such an interesting point because of all the work that, Jeffrey Bland and all these pioneers, including yourself, have done. And I feel like you have done such an incredible job of really bringing functional medicine to the masses. So now people know what functional medicine is. They know what looking for the root cause of their symptoms means. They're looking for ways to create health instead of just taking medications. And I noticed it, even being in a conventional family practice residency setting, more and more patients coming in that are saying, I don't want to be on these medications. What can I do to get off them? And that, to me, is really encouraging, that we're getting to a point in our culture where people want this and they want this type of care. And there's enough doctors who are learning about it that I really think that we can move forward to make it the standard operating system. And that is what I would love to see over the course of my career, is for us to be practicing this type of medicine as a standard for primary care and for specialty care as well.
And how are you doing that now? And how are you helping to sort of educate your colleagues and, sort of conventionally trained colleagues who may be not aware of functional medicine?
Well, I'm lucky that now I'm working with very enlightened colleagues, so that's good. But I think just speaking from going through residency, and obviously there are certain people who are going to be really receptive and really excited about it. Like you said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then there are other people who it's harder maybe to help them see it. And so I think just really the biggest thing is really taking good care of patients, and the results speak for themselves. So when patients go back to other doctors that they've seen and talk about the results that they've gotten with functional medicine, I think that speaks volumes, and that creates curiosity that then people want to learn more about it and understand it better. So I think number one, that's the most important part, is just taking really good care of patients. And then two is really practicing what we preach, right? Like, I think I saw that as a huge way in my residency or wherever you work with your colleagues who are maybe more conventionally trained to practice what you preach and really try to make sure that the things that you're doing in the office, you're eating good food, you're bringing good food to the office, you're not necessarily partaking in all the sweets and the donuts and things that people may bring in to celebrate birthdays, and showing how you practice these habits yourself. I think really it's when people get the firsthand experience of the impact that these kind of things have on their own lives that then they're able to see it and translate it to their patients.
That's right. I mean, it's so important. I think, when often, our colleagues who are a little resistant often change their mind when it's someone in their family or themselves that's sick, and then they start coming. It's interesting to me, but I get a lot of that, and it's actually I actually see this change happening. I see, even Cleveland Clinic, there's so much openness and interest. I see, other doctors being very, very much focused on learning how to treat things differently or incorporating this in their practice. I recently had a patient who sort of was being evaluated for an autoimmune disease, and I was taking care of her, and she wanted me to talk to her rheumatologist at UCLA. And I was like, oh, it's going to be one of those conversations where he's going to be, kind of negative. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And he got on the call and he's like, hey, I love your stuff. I just want to tell you, like, with my patients, I add in the anti-inflammatory diets, what I'm doing, and it is so much more effective than anything I ever did in the past. And my patients are getting better. Thank you. And I was like, wow, this is really great, because you're starting to see this creeping into, traditional care. And like you said, eventually it will just be the standard of care.
That's amazing. And I think really insightful what you said about when it's someone's family member or themselves that suddenly finds themselves in a health situation where the conventional system is failing them, and that's when they start to pay attention. And it almost makes me think about, shouldn't we be giving all of our patients that same type of care, like the same type of care that we would give to our family members? And so, yeah, I agree. I think it's on the horizon where it's going to become the standard.
It's pretty exciting. And tell us a little bit about how you sort of gone through your path. You've gone through residency in Cleveland Clinic and family medicine, and then you went right into functional medicine. So what are you doing now, and how can kind of that inspire others who are really thinking of branching out from their traditional training?
Yeah, so I was lucky that I was at the Cleveland Clinic because I had such great exposure to functional medicine through the center there. And then I did the IFM courses. I sort of sprinkled them in. I think I did AFMCP during medical school, and I did the other courses sprinkled in throughout residency. And I knew that I didn't want to work in a conventional primary care practice because I wanted to make sure that I had the time and the ability to implement these things with my patients. So now I'm working at a practice it's based out of Lexington, Kentucky, but it's sort of a national telemedicine practice called Wild Health, where we implement functional medicine principles and a lot of precision medicine and genomics as well with patients.
That's so fantastic. That's great. I mean, this is the future. And I think it's great, Julie, that you got so inspired at Cleveland Clinic. I for some reason, I thought you were already into it. I didn't realize that, that you had never heard of it before. So this is great. I mean, you never know.
Yeah, I had just heard of it, but I had no idea what it really was. And, hearing you lay it all out there and say exactly what functional medicine was, it was to me, in a lot of ways, because of how much CrossFit changed my life and had an impact on how I saw health. It was the same hearing that presentation from you was like, wow, I know that, the way I practice is never going to be the same now.
That's so great. That's so great. And what do you want to focus on going forward?
I really would like to see that functional medicine incorporated on a community level. So that's one of the reasons why I love the combination of functional medicine and CrossFit. CrossFit is functional movement. It makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of parallels there, but I think being able to implement this in communities where people have the support, just like you did with the Daniel plan, then we have people doing healthy behaviors together, and then we use, the other aspects of functional medicine on an individual basis as we need to. But there's so much power in community.
It's sort of the intersection of the body and biology. It's also the intersection of that with the bigger idea of how we get healthy in community. There's a great book written by Nigel Crisp called, health happens at home. The hospitals are for repairs.
Oh, I love that.
And I think that's sort of how we should think about it. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, Julie. Inspired by what you're doing and your work, and just excited to be able to sort of be in this journey with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being such a pioneer and making it possible for me to be following this path.
All right. Well, take care, Julie, and we'll see you next time.